There are some who are in a fallen race who want to be restored, and they have basically communicated to say, we didn't decide to follow this path. We've discovered we were sold down the river effectively by our ancestors, and they're races. They're not individually created beings within these dimensions, and they want to be restored, and they want their dimensions to be restored, and they are, but not all of them within those dimensions do, because there are always there's always a hierarchical power system, and those who control the power don't want freedom for those who are there using and as their slaves or other menials. So that goes on. So there's always a sort of a tension that's going on, but we want to introduce restoration to bring about a restoration of those races. Now, there are some races that never fell. And there's a couple of them that I have met. And most of the ones I've met, and I met 80 odd different races. Most of them have fallen because that's my mission, to bring restoration. There were a couple where we engaged in portals, a portal out in the constellation of Cancer, went into a portal, and on the other side of the portal, there were groups of portals that were all dimensional. And there were one portal that we engaged, and there were some beings that came out of that portal who weren't fallen and offered us help. And they wanted to serve the whole restoration process. So we engaged them and asked for their help. What can you do to help? And we assigned them to take the message of restoration to the other portals within that cosmos or constellational hub. And that was what we did, and we just did what we felt to do. We were all flying by the seat of our pants when we're doing all this stuff, so it was a little bit like that made sense, so we do that. They introduced themselves to us, told us what their names were. They look quite weird things, quite odd looking beings. There seemed to be some indication that they were trying to communicate, and they had been trying to communicate with me while I was asleep. So my spirit is usually free to roam and travel and do stuff while I'm asleep. So there was some hint that they had been trying to communicate, which is why my frequency triggered them to engage when we engaged them. But that's as much as I know. Now, again, I don't think they were designed to come here into our dimension and function here, which is where the sort of where it all goes off key, in a way. And neither a fallen angel, or neither were angels supposed to function here outside of their allotted function within God's kingdom. They're there as heirs, as servants to the heirs of salvation. They were never there to do their own thing independently. So we're redressing the balance by restoring these beings and bringing them back into God's purposes, and therefore then increasing our ability, I guess, to reach more. Yeah, so that's been my experience, but I've got a limited experience.
So if they wanted to assist you, then they must have had knowledge of God and restoration and everything else.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a sense where the frequency of our sonship, which is increasing in its capacity, has touched those dimensions in a way that they've been reaching out. And that has come primarily, initially, through the portals, which were in the sort of beyond place that I engaged in the realms of heaven. And so initially, the Father took me into this anteroom in which there were 3 races that wanted interaction and they wanted help. And initially what they said was, tell us the story. Tell us the story. I was like, well, what story? The love story. So there's something within all of their societies, whatever you want to call them, civilizations, I don't know what you call them, because they're dimensional places. I'm not really sure that they're like populated with planet. I don't know. It's not like there's another universe in there exactly. you know, from my experience anyway. And they wanted to know the love story. So there's something I think God has placed within all of creation. He's within all of creation, isn't he? You know, all things are created within him, but he is within all things. So I do think there's a sense where there is a consciousness of God that people have ignored or been independent of, but is still there. Within us, it says that God has placed eternity in our hearts. Now, what does that mean? You know, and now initially I would think, oh, a desire to return to eternity in our hearts, but maybe it goes beyond that. Maybe it's something of the eternal consciousness, or maybe that is what God is within. Eternity, the eternal now of God is within us, wanting us, drawing us to reconnect relationally. And I do think that that is probably true of all of creation, that God is some aspect of the eternal aspect of God, the transcendent aspect of God is within it. But then that can become immanent. When we engage it relationally, the transcendent becomes the immanent because you become personally connected to it. You know, if the eternal aspect of God has always been within me, I didn't know it until I engaged that in an immanent way, relational way, then I discovered that. So I think it does sort of open up a sense of God created all of this. You know, Colossians talks about Jesus created it through him and for him and by him and all of that. And he's restored or reconciled the whole that he's made, or all things, by the blood of the cross. So there's a sense where the story of God's love goes beyond the cross, of course, into God's identification with creation through Jesus as a choice. Now, we often think of that as he came as a man, but creation was made for man. So as Jesus was fulfilling our sonship as the Son of God, then it's restoring the connection to creation. And I think that's what creation has been feeling, sensing, an increasing measure of the frequency of sonship, and therefore a connecting or reaching out. Now, of course, there's always been a design to use that for its own ends, hence a Luciferian agenda to create a counterfeit system of government and travel and all the rest of it. So we've got to make sure we don't operate in the negative form of that, and make sure whatever we are doing operates in the positive. But all those races were designed to be in relationship with us as sons of God. And what that relationship was intended to be, and how it will be restored back to that, I think we've got more to discover exactly what it all is. But the earth has not yet been restored to its rightful connection to these dimensions, or even to the dimensions of heaven. It's still operating in a way which you have to enter in through portals, rather than it being connected in a way which is a dimensional connection to it, which doesn't require portals. It's what it actually will look like. I guess, initially God walking together in gardens that are connected. Now that's figurative of a fruitful place. So hopefully the earth will become a completely fruitful place. All of the solar system will be a fruitful place, and that will continue to expand. So all the dimensions will be fruitful places. And I think we do have a role towards it, to govern in a way that brings peace and makes it peaceful, harmonious, in union and oneness of purpose, as God intended. Not as is at the moment, which may be, less harmonious and more in tension and out of sync with what God originally intended. Hi everyone, we're starting a Patreon page, patreon.com/freedomarc, and we would like to invite you to partner with us in taking the message of God's unconditional love, limitless grace, triumphant mercy to a bigger global audience.